Tao, guest who has not been on in a long time. I think the last time I had him on, I had not been to New Zealand or Australia, or I don't even think it was probably before the Super Bowl, maybe right after, in or abouts. He is our sports professor, former leader of all things Orioles and Texas Rangers and Major League Baseball and AOL and all sorts of places. He is Marty Conway. He is the Georgetown sports professor who often gets on camels in Qatar and goes over and helps those folks with all sorts of things. But, I mean, I got koalas and kangaroos on my trip, but I do want to ride a camel, Marty. I do. I do, in the desert.
Well, you might have to do that at the Maryland Zoo, but I'll ride one for you when I go back in May. How's that?
Yeah, send pictures. It's always wonderful when that happens.
Yeah.
All right, look, man, I don't even know where to begin with you because it's been a little while, right? First off, the Masson money thing almost happened last week, and it didn't because of a snowstorm in New York. So there's all of that. But then the Brady Anderson story comes out, and, I mean, I'm going to start the program there because I don't know how long or deep, and you and I have not green-roomed each other, but you were a long-time Major League Baseball executive for George Bush, for Edward Bennett Williams and Eli Jacobs in that period of time with the Orioles and Peter Angelos. What do you make of the Brady Anderson story? Because I know you have some, what do they say, inside ball on this, right?
Well, number one, I worked for the team when Ken Rosenthal worked for the Sun. So, that's how far back that goes. Just right off the bat, a couple of interesting things, and that is, who wants this story out there? It's not public. It's not published unless someone wants that story out there, and that's number one. And there are a couple, maybe more than one theory on that as to why. And nobody to locally. So that's number one. And number two, I haven't seen that many people from the organization quoted freely in a story in 3 to 5 years, maybe longer. And it seemed like everybody was freely open an opportunity to offer a quote for a story like that. And in this...
Including Brady, by the way.
Exactly. And in this sort of regime, that is... we know that's unusual. So, look, the story's interesting. It's intriguing. There's a lot of, sort of behind the curtain stuff. But just on the face of it, what purpose does it serve? Are people score settling? What exactly are they setting up something for the future? What exactly is that? Because, like I said, this doesn't come about by accident. I mean, I don't think Ken Rosenthal tripped across this in his crisscrossing the spring training game. So
I think Ken Rosenthal must have been pulled up by several people. Clearly the Dave Wallace part of this, that a qualified pitching coach said, I can't work here anymore. And he was sort of handpicked by Buck from my, understanding of that he just couldn't take it anymore. And, that was part of the feel to me. Part of the feel all along, though, I mean, to be honest, this has been strange from the beginning, but this is the way they run the franchise. You know what I mean? I've called him Brady Angelos for years and years, right? So it's never going to be normal with him running it, and you and I haven't even talked about the Redskins situation. I feel like I've talked to everybody else about it, but you know as well as anyone when it's run in a different fashion, and last year you called it unorthodox. I thought that was a great line for it. When you won't allow your franchise to sell tickets to the customers, which is where we were this time last year. This is this year's dysfunction with the Orioles. And look, it all washes out when they win 94 games and they go to the playoffs as they've done the last couple of years. But, it's starting to feel like the end of something here with Machado and the end of... They're not going to win 103 games and run away this year. I don't see any way that's going to happen. I think they're going to scuffle a little bit this year. And this is a little crack in the foundation that I found to be, like you, there's a lot of inside poker going on in that story. And Rosenthal won't come on with me and talk about it. He just won't, And none of them are going to come on. So I'm going to sit here and pick on the carcass of it because there's a lot going on there, right?
And then I would add to that too that mild-mannered Matt Wieters, went about as far as he's going to go in terms of critiquing or criticizing whatever his former organization, right? And so keep in mind that he's only been gone, quote unquote, 2 weeks,
5
3 weeks.
minutes.
He signed, right at the onset or just after spring training had
There's
started.
still exhaust back here from the bus pulling out, right?
Yeah. So, this is something that, for him to get it in the last 2 weeks, I presume that Rosenthal wrote that story over the course of a month or longer. And
it was a doozy, right? Like, I thought I was done with it, and then there was another chapter. And then I thought, okay, and then there's more. And I'm sort of blown away by all of it. I mean, I think I'll be talking about this one for weeks and weeks, right? I mean, this isn't something that just goes away, right? I mean, there's clearly some hard feelings and something going on there if you know anything about management, right?
Well, yeah, and then as you continue to scroll down, Brady's comments got more and more elaborate and specific and sort of authentic, and you come away, you can't help but come away from that and say, this guy has a sense that he can do almost anything. I mean, he literally said, I can look at players, tennis players, golfers, whatever, and I can see how they should be functioning. You just don't find people who come out and represent themselves that way and dismissive of coaching and dismissive of some other areas. So, no knock against certain types of doctors or other types of treatments, but, this sort of smacks of a little bit of psychosomatic in some of the case of the players or whatnot. And I think, quite honestly, the other comments made it seem that both Buck and Dan just sort of tolerate it and say, for the price of what I'm being paid, I'm going to tolerate this for as long as I need to. And the last piece.
Well, they couldn't get out if they wanted to. You're right. I mean, they can't. They're not allowed to leave until the end of 18. I mean, Dan's already tried to get out. I don't know. I mean, Dan's saying, well, we don't answer to Brady and Brady doesn't answer to us. Well, then what the hell is he doing in your dugout? I mean, like, really?
I thought it was really compelling, when Rosenthal asked him, Brady, who you report to, and it seemed so simple to say, yeah, I report to the general manager or I report to this, and he fired it back at him and said, well, who does Buck report to and who does Dan report to? And I thought to myself, in an organization, that's not typically how everybody understands in the org structure where they fit, whether they were hired by the person above them or not. There's usually a clear understanding. So a free agent, literally a free agent with a locker in the clubhouse, and atypical, unusual, unorthodox. We could label it several different ways. But,
well, inviting players out to your house to hang out for 3 months and fixing pitchers. I mean, the whole notion that Brady Anderson and Mike Ryan, look, if it's working on the field, you get to say it's working on the field, right? Like, we have a president that says, look at the stock market, I fixed everything, right? That's the measurement, I guess, is winning. But clearly there's something more than just a little bit of smoke here, right? I mean, at a lot of levels, and that's why guys like you peeling back the onion further than, well, they're winning, so it must be okay. It's not okay when the decorated pitching coach, 2.5 decades, says, I can't work here anymore, I need to leave. And then you go to the manager and say, why did he leave? Well, he didn't like that guy. Well, who is that guy? Well, he's a guy that used to play here. Really? Well, what's his role? Well, we really don't know. Well, can we talk to him? Well, not really, because the owner talks to him. Well, what about the owner's son? Well, he's in the locker room too. And I can't imagine. Like, that just flies in the face of every management principle that there's ever been for anything that's not a poorly run diner.
Yeah, well, we would not teach that on our management structure. But then the other oddity is that Roger McDowell replaces Dave Wallace, and Roger McDowell was pitching coach in the Atlanta system where Dave came from, and he was there for 10 years, so it's not like he doesn't know what he's coming into. So, again, it's a matter of, as long as they can keep all balls in the air at this point and stay above 500 or whatnot, But yeah, there's a history there, and I'm sure it leads to some unusual days in the clubhouse, in the boardroom, and on and off the field. So,
boy, the Buck Showalter of 1993 would have never, you know what I mean?
Oh my
like
gosh, no.
the things that he's learned through the sport from the time you were involved in the sport to now.
Yep.
It's astonishing for me to sit on the outside of it and have any belief that there's a whole lot of integrity about it, other than I just manage the team, bro. You know what I mean? And I get a word in when I can with the old man, and sometimes he listens and sometimes he doesn't. And but it's a whole lot different than being the guy on television where you're critiquing such activities, correct?
Oh yeah, completely. So, look, we'll see where this goes. I do think that it spilling out into the public like it did won't be a good thing in the short or longer run, because now people that were not necessarily in the know about it, or people will feel more freely to talk about it. But look, the one thing I know from being around the game for the 14 years that I was, that is the clubhouse is sacred. There's a professionalism code amongst people that, quote unquote, wear the uniform versus those that don't wear the uniform. And I can tell you that through the times that I worked for a minor league team when I was younger to the point where working through the major league team, you knew whether you were welcome in the clubhouse or not. There was very clear and obvious signs that you were welcome. And what I learned early on was if I was wearing a shirt, a tie, whatever, and I didn't have a microphone or a notepad in my hand, I didn't belong in there. I would literally, as a vice president, stay outside the locker room and ask somebody to go in and get somebody so that I would never be seen as thinking that I could just easily walk in and out. And the Players Association and others, there are rules and protocols with respect to Major League Clubhouse, and that's what many players now. Look, if Adam Jones and others want to set the tone for that by thinking that it's okay, then the players run the clubhouse. The manager doesn't run the clubhouse. The coaches don't run the clubhouse. The front office doesn't run the clubhouse in baseball. It's the players' domain. So that's the biggest part of the intrigue, I think, is learning kind of people are now seeing the inner sanctum and the dynamics of what that's like. It's their workplace.
And why would they want that out in the open? We keep going back to that. Do you have any conjecture on that, or just a whole lot of conjecture? Because it feels like there's a lot of things that could be going on here, but it's a curious story to be writing this week, 2 weeks before opening day. I also find it curious that, the one son is running around doing radio shows and talking about free speech and, freedom of the press and Russia and the politics and all of that. I take umbrage with that as a guy who had my press pass taken away, but and Peter's nowhere to be found, right? I mean, when's the last time Peter said a word about anything to anybody or has been seen publicly, quite frankly?
Yeah, no, and that's the other thing. So between Mass and between that, there's some things that are off the field at the moment that I'm sure they hope don't mushroom up into some bigger cloud than what they are. They potentially can, but again, back to the original thing, the intrigue is around why the story now, I know why it gets published during spring training because baseball's interest, but why before the season? And I would say, on balance, that will probably be more negative than it is positive, but we'll see.
He is Marty Conway. He is the sports business professor at Georgetown, doing all things with us, and former long-time Major League Baseball executive with the Rangers and the Orioles as well. On the other side of the baseball thing for the Orioles and for local interest, clearly this Adam Jones thing and Machado and Scope, who played well into the night on Monday night as well. The World Baseball Classic, I don't know that everybody's watching it. I don't know that it's universal amongst baseball fans. Clearly on the East Coast, that catch that Adam Jones had on Machado happened at 2 in the morning on a Saturday night. But it's been fun to watch, and certainly the players are taking it seriously, and I don't know that they're making a lot of money on it, but there's been some splash, and from a guy who loves baseball, and I know how much you love baseball as well, there's been some passion here the last 10 days that you're not going to be able to replicate on April 9th in Cleveland, right?
No. So behind all that, the numbers suggest that it has been a hit and may have be cresting the hill, so to speak, in terms of its popularity. For the first time through the first two rounds, it drew just under 1 million people total for the first two rounds. So we have the championship round to complete. They actually had a sellout. The game that you talked about, that USA Dominican Republic game, was a sellout with 43,000 people in San Diego. So the numbers are supporting the increase in popularity. And this is a big thing. This is despite ESPN completely ignoring it, pretty much. If you notice, ESPN essentially stays behind the relationships that they have. So during all the World Baseball Classic, they tend to be talking about NFL free agency, or which players are not playing for the Cavs, or what Russell Westbrook is doing. So you mentioned that game. Not only was it 2 a.m. or whatever it was on a Saturday, it was on MLB Network, which is 2/3 of the distribution, if that, of ESPN.
Yeah, nobody's watching it in a hotel room, right? We know that much.
So people had to seek it out. They saw it through highlights, et cetera. So I think there's a couple of things there. Number one, and then also the last thing I would add is, I've read a bunch of press accounts and followed some certain media, and there's a certain, I guess, I don't know, arrogance in the media that this is a U.S. thing, that, the U.S. team has to be in the final, et cetera. One of the media outlets suggested that, well, if they really wanted to make this popular, they would play the semifinals and the finals during the All-Star break of Major League Baseball. They had over 200,000 people in the Tokyo pool round. Japan is crazy for baseball. The Dominican and Puerto Rico are crazy for baseball. The Netherlands story is a great story into the Final Four. So,
yeah, can you imagine when they send the U.S. guys over to Tokyo to play?
Yeah,
make them get on the plane instead of Jonathan Scope or whatever, and send the Dominicans over there to play the Japanese. I mean, the place would go crazy with the star power of these guys over there, right?
The story of the World Baseball Classic, for me, is like the story of the Ryder Cup, but from the European perspective, right? In the U.S., we think about it, well, we pay attention when it's here or when so-and-so plays. In Europe, they support the Ryder Cup all the time. And they're crazy for the Ryder Cup because they're crazy for golf. People outside of the U.S. in those markets, like I said, I mean, I know Puerto Rico is part of the U.S., but in the Dominican and Tokyo and even emerging places like that, that's what the World Baseball Classic is, because where baseball, Major League Baseball, wants to go is they want to go to those markets in Mexico and Australia and Japan and other places like that and truly grow the game. The game itself in the U.S. is probably within a few percentage points of its, other than the TV revenues, at its crest. I mean, 75 million people buying tickets. We're not going to see 90 million people buying tickets in 10 years. It's going to grow in very, very small increments if it grows, because we have minor league baseball, we have college baseball, we have all of that. So,
well, it also helps that the games don't suck, right? I mean, we've seen the United States Olympic hockey team go to an Olympics and make asses of themselves, go to World Game. This has been clean, exciting, well played. No one's really gotten hurt in a controversial way. There's been no Pete Rose, Ray Fosse moment, brush back. There's been no brawls. None of that. It's just been what we love about baseball, which are the best players playing really hard and caring, and all that nationalism that gets wrapped into that. But the play itself, when Adam Jones is stealing home runs from his own teammate, you couldn't write this. You couldn't script what happened in Miami with the Dominican team a week and a half ago, right?
Yeah, when you see the passion for Dominican baseball, Puerto Rican baseball, you really have an appreciation. But I would also shift the conversation to what this does for Adam Jones and Manny Machado. And we'll take one or both of those. But for Manny Machado, this World Baseball Classic has put him on a pedestal amongst the best Dominican players, literally, that there are. Now, I know he's from Miami, et cetera, and his heritage is Dominican, but he clearly wants to identify in that way. And I think a couple things could happen. Manny Machado, the next 2 years, could have incredible seasons. Forget Bryce Harper. He could be on par with Mike Trout and some other people in terms of everyday contributions, which will make it even harder for him to stay in Baltimore, period, just because of what will be offered to him in a year or two. And number two, Adam Jones. I've said this for a long time to friends and family about Adam Jones. I think Adam Jones is one of the best players in Oriole history that has yet to really reach that sort of respect level. And when I say that, I thought Adam Jones was Eddie Murray for a long time. He could have been the most influential African American baseball player or maybe athlete in this town for a period of time. And now I think that Adam Jones is going to get another contract with the Orioles. Maybe it's a short 2 or 3 year extension, but I think it's going to put Adam Jones in a different place in terms of, where he belongs in Baltimore sports for the Orioles, et cetera. I think people have given him a great deal of respect, and his play on Team USA, I think, will just now get him not only local but national recognition for how he plays the game and what his commitment is, not just a contribution, but what his commitment is to the game. So I'm happy to see it. I hope that people in and around Baltimore will really, really absorb what he's doing for the franchise, and they should lock him up in something a little bit longer here soon so that everybody knows he will end his career here in Baltimore no matter what.
It's only the second time I've heard lock him up this week. Marty Conway joining us here, sports business professor at Georgetown. And speaking of international things, right, we talk about you going over to Qatar and me running around the world with Bruce Springsteen. We're doing this London trip this year, right? And I know you and I have not talked about this. We've obviously sold a lot of seats. We're doing a trip. There's a couple of trips around town. Ours we think is the best, and certainly we know it's the most affordable. And you can throw me an email if you want to go or click on the road trips tab. But, the NFL in London, a lot of fans still maybe not sophisticated about it or have been paying attention to it other than, hey, there's Buffalo Bills are playing at 9:30 in the morning or whatever. It's why. Why is the NFL playing in London? And on the back end of this conversation we just had about the World Baseball Classic and, trying to grow the game internationally, the NFL is the most NFL. It's a Mid-American sport, and it's gigantic here, but no one in China watches or cares. And how does that change? Well, the Ravens are going to get their little piece finally, and I think a lot of our fans are really excited about it. Marty, I think we're going to take 20, 30,000 fans over there. I've got over 100 on my trip already, and every day there's more trickling in. There is something sexy about getting on a plane and going over and seeing the Ravens play in London. A lot of people want to do it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so we had a group of students. We were in London last week or a week or two ago during the spring break, and we had about 20 students, and we set up this trip far in advance, and we had an incredible opportunity for them where we took them to meet with some of the most established brands and events and agencies in London and in Europe, everything from NBA Europe to the English Premier League to Wimbledon, you name it, Manchester City Football Club. We took them to a football match on a Saturday, and every place we went, no matter the brand or the agency, came the question, okay, what about the NFL in Europe? What about Jacksonville, whoever, whatever, playing there? And the response was very similar no matter where you went, which is they are accepting of it and increasingly accepting of it. They're just having a hard time really comprehending, and I think it's absent having their own team there, which is to say, how do we engage with this? What do we do? I'll give you a quick example. You go to a football match on a Saturday at 3 o'clock, which is tea time, high time. All the local stadiums are filled, whatever they're 10,000 or 50,000, and people watch the match. They go to the pubs locally. They go in and watch the match. They sit for 45 minutes. There's a 15-minute midterm break, halftime. They'll mill around. They'll come back in. They'll watch the second half. There's no getting up, getting down. There's no vendors. There's no additional music being played during the course of the game. There's no, defense chants, all different things like that. So culturally and socially, they look at the NFL games and they're trying to comprehend, okay, what do I do? How do I react this way? It's almost if you gave a right-handed person a left-handed glove. eventually they would figure it out, but they're going to be flailing around
Yeah, it's
for a
so
little while.
intuitive to us, right? And, I'll give you an
Yeah.
example of that, Marty, just on a stupid little level. My mom is, 98 years old. I don't know, about 5-6 years ago, she was 91, 92. I took her to a Ravens preseason game, and there's a video of it. You can go see it on, Google WNST Jets. They played the Jets. It was when Rex Ryan took the gig there, so it's been a little while. But she had never been to the football stadium. And my mother, my mother would get on the bus and go to Memorial Stadium, watch the Colts play. My mother went to 30 or 40 Colts games and probably 100 or maybe more baseball games at Memorial Stadium during the course of her lifetime. And when she walked into the stadium, she didn't get it. You know what I mean? Like there was so much.
Right.
It was so Vegas. It was so lit up.
Yeah.
It was the scoreboards and the video and all that. And I think if you're not sophisticated with that part of it or have not experienced that part of it, it is larger than life. It really is. And I think for even people in the middle of America whose only experience is maybe going to an Iowa Cornhuskers game to show up at Yankee Stadium in New York, the new Yankee Stadium, it's a different kind of thing going on, right?
And also, look, London is not Green Bay, and it's not Jacksonville, and it's not Kansas City. London is New York, or it's Paris, right? There's so much going on. The city is alive all the time. You can take the metro any place you want around. It's safe, it's secure, it's quick. So to make a splash, and look, they've been there now many years running and have had many games annually, what the NFL hopes to do is the NFL hopes to expand somehow, some way into a few additional time zones. That's really the China opportunity in 2018 is still being worked on. I don't think it's going to happen, at least people tell us, because of the logistics of it, the security, the safety, all the travel, the time, things like that. They really think that they can make some hay expansion-wise, and I mean playing games, not necessarily moving a team, in London. That's as far east, if you will, that they could go. They're looking at someplace like a Toronto or someplace in Canada, and then Mexico City. There's some outside folks that say, well, we can go into Germany place. It's not that realistic. So I think those are the additional time zones that they would like to capture and figure out if there's a way to do media deals. They'd like to do a big media deal in Europe to broadcast not just the Super Bowl, but more games. They'd like to do more merchandise, and they'd like to do something in terms of sponsorship. Those are the objectives, but what they're going to run into is that sooner or later, every team is going to have to give up a home game in order for this rotation to work. And right now, you had Jacksonville and you had Tampa Bay and some others either willing or able to
even as they start adding
game.
all these games too, that makes it even more tricky. Doing one or two a year there, you've always got some bottom fisher that can give a game away, right? But when you're trying to do four, it gets a little trickier.
But Baltimore, for example, can't because their lease with the Stadium Authority requires 8 regular season games to be played there. Now, maybe that can be amended. Maybe it can be something worked out, but I'm saying that's what the NFL is going to be facing in many markets where there's not flexibility. So one of the things they've done is they passed an amendment to their constitution or their charter that if you're awarded a Super Bowl, you have to join in that rotation of giving up a game to play in London. So that's going to get them a few more teams. That's going to get them Atlanta. That's going to get them a couple of other teams, Minnesota, that are hosting Super Bowls. But the issue is going to be more than half of the teams have lease agreements that require them to play a minimum of 8 games in the stadium that was paid for with public funds. If they can overcome that, if the NFL can award Baltimore and the Stadium Authority their piece of the pie, then I think they can work that out. But that's also what they're facing in terms of business-wise, having a hard time literally making this work. And at this point, no one thinks that there's going to be an expansion franchise in London in the near term, that they're going to have to try to make this work with Jacksonville and a few others and then see what happens down the road. But there's interest. There's certainly curiosity. They're building some following, but it's smack up against football, which is which is like the flag and the queen. It's passion. And then there are other people in there. Rugby, while we were there, it was the Six Nations Rugby Cup going on. the England-Scotland match you couldn't get a ticket to. So they're up against some other important sports, and the NBA would like to get a piece of it as well. So they're up against some other really big sports who aren't ceding any territory anytime soon to the NFL.
We will not have a British team in the World Baseball Classic anytime soon, I don't think, right?
No, not unless they're going to hit it off the ground like in cricket. That's about it.
I saw that over New Zealand, by the way. We walked to see Springsteen in Christchurch, New Zealand, and we walked past a field, and they were playing two sports there: cricket and rugby. They were practicing.
Exactly.
It was training, as they say, training, of course. But
you're talking about two of the four largest participation sports in the world, cricket and rugby, and they don't have professional leagues or even really much in the way of opportunity here in the U.S., the largest economy in the world. So that kind of gives you an indication of where things stand.
I'm just all ramped up about hockey, Marty. We're not even talked about that. We'll get together again soon and break some bread. Hopefully on opening day, we'll get to say hello as the Orioles make their way north, because I know we do deep down. We love baseball. We're just always trying to fix it, right, Marty? It's never gonna. It's like the government. It's never really going to get fixed. We're just going to argue about it.
We love it so much we want it to be perfect, and we live with it without. But if given the opportunity, I know we could perfect it.
I'd sign Manny Machado. That would be perfect. Hey, man, great having you on.
Okay, thanks, Nestor. See you down the road.
As always, Marty Conway, our professor of business down at Georgetown University. You can follow him, Marty Conway, out on LinkedIn as well as on Twitter. One of my favorite dudes to have on. And there was a lot of meat on the bone, as they say there. You want to react to it, as they say in radio, if you want to react, or in cable news, reaction, fake news, go to our Facebook, our Twitter, our LinkedIn, our Snapchat. We're everywhere. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there for anything you miss around here, 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. Download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear. The morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. every morning. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Last but never least, breaking news. Anything big happens, we'll text it out to you. Make sure you're the smartest person in the room. Just jump on the WNST text service. It's free of charge and powered up by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5 with the SSV on WNST. Don't forget, you can reach me anytime. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And you can email me anytime, nasty@WNST.net. Yes, we have room on our London trip for you. Toss me a note. Hit the road trips tab at WNST.net. Big thanks to head coach Barry Trotz for coming out earlier in the week, too. We had a lot of fun with him. If you haven't seen that or heard that, please feel free to do so. Even if you're not a big Caps fan, I think you will find it engaging and entertaining. Barry's one of the good ones. Big thanks to Fremont Mortgage for sponsoring our show, as well as Greenmount Station for hosting the show. Chris with the crab cakes up there. Good work, and big thanks to Ed Frankovic for covering all things Caps and being a great shotgun rider up there. We gave Luke the night off, but he'll be back around for opening day. A little downtime. There's no downtime in Ravens free agency. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.